Hello everyone, it is your host, SethTheProgrammer, and with me today, I have my good old pal, Clyde the Weeaboo, and this is sort of a rare instance where you're going to get an unscripted collab on the main channel again. I know that I've been really pumping out these like highly edited, really scripted, overly informative videos recently, and so we sort of just wanted to just make an old school type collab for you guys, especially for this sponsor today, and this will sort of be a follow-up to a video I did on my side channel where I do live streams a lot, but I also post some videos that I'm like, maybe I shouldn't post that on the main, but I still kind of want to make them. The previous version of this was Itachi versus 99% of Fiction, but this one will be Aizen versus 99% of Fiction. So obviously Clyde is the Bleach Power Scaler man on YouTube, and so he and I are working on, Naruto versus Ichigo or whatever. So we have been at this for a long time, so I thought, who better than him? And so the main thing you have to know about Aizen as a verse soloing entity is that he is one of the few characters in Bleach that is ever even used like in crossverse like that. For instance, a character like Ichigo, Byakuya, or even Kenpachi, they are not bad in crossverse necessarily, but they're mainly AP merchants. You could say they might have some type of spiritual attacks and things like that. Whereas similarly in Naruto and say the Raikage or Tsunade, a lot of those characters tend to just be AP merchants, and even Dragon Ball characters, they are just like very heavy-hitting AP merchants. But Aizen is actually one of those few characters where you throw him into a crossverse, and he has a very, very specific plethora of abilities where if you don't have a counter to them, he sort of wins by default. And unlike Itachi, who is a 1v1 heavyweight character, like can you resist his mind hacks? Can you resist an astral attack? Can you resist his causality manipulation? Itachi can't solo many verses, like in the sense that he doesn't have the stamina. He can't spam Tsukuyomi like 50 times or something like that. Whereas Aizen, on the other hand, he's more of a verse soloing character. Let's say he's even in his seals like he is in Thousand Year Blood War against Yuha. If you were to throw him in a verse, he realistically could slaughter everyone in that verse. He doesn't need to use 50% of his stamina to attack one guy and take him out. Realistically, his strategy is a lot different. And so I'll kind of let Clyde get into sort of the genesis of that, which is mainly how just unkillable he is. But let's lay out just a very flat why he's above most verses, just in terms of even AP as an AP merchant.
Ad time.
In Bleach, the topic of souls is brought up quite a lot. Not just as the center of the magic system in the verse, but also as this metaphysical idea. One such way one can look at the soul of a character is with their voice acting. Take Kisuke Urahara's voice, brought to life exceptionally well by the talented Shinichiro Miki, or Isshin, who is imbued with this playful fatherly spirit by Toshiyuki Morikawa. Well, what if I were to tell you that both of these wonderful voice actors are in today's sponsor, Silver and Blood Requiem? Unlike in Bleach, where Kisuke and Isshin fight on the same side in Silver and Blood Requiem, their characters Kane and Augustine's fight are ideologically opposed, fighting on opposite sides. Silver and Blood Requiem is an anime-style strategic action-packed RPG. I've always been a big fan of gothic stylings in my games, and Silver and Blood Requiem has just that, with high-quality anime-style animations and this gothic style that looks straight out of a Dracula movie. Like seriously, the architecture should probably be the textbook example for what gothic architecture should be. This standard defining art style details the entire continent of Menexus, which is full of different biomes like forests, deserts, and plains, and you can explore this content and become a legend, participating in intricate RPG battles, exploring concepts such as fate versus free will or life and death. In Silver and Blood Requiem, you will strengthen over 50 different vassals with higher gacha probabilities such as an SSR rate of 4%, which is way more generous than the industry standard, and guaranteed SSR within 10 to 20 pulls. A player-friendly pity system, and abundant launch rewards from 4 different factions which enter the Lost Courtyard, prove your mettle in the Blood Arena, or even seize control of the Twilight Citadel. Silver and Blood Requiem is a very tactical turn-based RPG that occurs on a chessboard with a lot of freedom to explore the strategic card battle system that makes it much deeper than just stat trading and number crunching. There are faction advantages and skill synergies that mix up the combat along with real-time battle reactions. On top of all this crunchy combat, each character also has a moon phase they are tuned to, including full moon, waning moon, and new moon. When a character uses an ultimate, it triggers one of these phases, and when all 3 have been activated, the Blood Moon arises, drastically amping your character, allowing you to turn the tide. To top off all of this, the game features music by the renowned composer Yasunori Nishiki. The main theme, Moon in the Myth, honestly kinda slaps. And this isn't even mentioning the star-studded voice cast, including such voice actors such as Takahito Koyasu and Akari Kito, who bring the vassals to life. In Silver and Blood Requiem, Blood Memories Awaken, the path home begins. Click the link below the video or scan the QR code on the screen right now to download Silver and Blood Requiem and join the What Hue Does Your Blood Hold events and win amazing gifts right now. Now, we're not going to go over everything here, but few things to note. Many lower characters, such as lieutenants in Bleach, can dodge Nagations, they can dodge light rays. Many fodder characters can react to the Ashvalen light, which can dash down from, honestly, this weird, like, sort of pseudo-pocket dimension, which could take weeks of normal travel speed to reach. It comes down instantly, and these fodder Stern Ritter can dodge it. Aizen then scales above many of these, like, light-based attacks, dozens upon dozens, if not thousands of times over, just extremely lowballing. Let's just be straight up honest. And so you kind of get this weird MFTL, immortal, mind-hacking, highly intelligent, existence-erasing god character who might have months of stamina, immortal lifespan coming into your verse. Even Ichigo at the beginning of Bleach against his fight against Byakuya, I talk about how the Sokyoku, or the Executioner's Gauntlet, was going to destroy all of existence, and even if Ichigo was fighting 132 of its power and had to gradually grow in strength to reach that existence-erasing power, and I was just talking about the Soul Society. These characters reach many tiers into just planet level, just like flatly. Then, of course, there are characters like Grimjouk and Busta Star, and then by the time you get into like the anime, they're just shaking these whole realms of reality, just multiple realms of reality. Yuha's threatening possibly the Garganta space and the greater space, as well as these multiple realities, which can be interpreted as sort of, I'm gonna be honest, even lowballing, like solar systems or galaxies to possibly universes. This would also engulf, say, like the Senna space, which is just objectively probably a solar system, has its own star in it. And these characters all surpass Senna and stuff like that. And not many things can actually deal with that. So to get started, let's go over the first point here. Just how immortal is Aizen really? Just for clarification, you know, obviously I broke down the speed and AP merchant shit, but what about the immortality?
Yeah, I guess the way you worded things off the dome is a pretty good way to sort of categorize what he can do off the dome. You know, we're talking about a character that just has like a lot of arguable, casual, beyond FTL feats, anywhere from a planetary to possibly solar system and universal tier, you know, entity, especially based on what the anime is doing right now with some of these Zero Squad related feats. But when we lean into a lot of his abilities, that we sort of got to clarify for just how really ridiculous Aizen actually is. You know, starting off with immortality, I mean, he not only has just like general regeneration as shown even before the Hogyoku transformations, he sort of is able to heal wounds on the fly. It's almost like it restores the actual existence of that initial body beforehand.
Like when he got cut by the slash or whatever that one time on the shoulder.
Yeah, Ichigo assumes he's got like hollow related abilities, but it's more like it's restoring what was there. You could just call it healing, you know, for the sake of not being complicated with it. But when we get to the later parts of what Aizen does against Ichigo, he basically gets hit by an attack that he regards, in his words, to be on a different plane of existence in terms of power. He makes like an analogy, which you could also interpret as just straight up science or matter of fact from Kubo's dialogue he's put through Aizen. But the way he words it is, he thinks Ichigo is on a different plane of existence above him in terms of dimensional tiering. He gets hit by that attack. It completely removes him from visual appearance on the actual manga page, and he just comes back. And this happens again later in the series with Yuha, who is arguably way beyond Mugetsu, and he is able to surpass beings that are able to shake the multiple universes of Bleach casually just from releasing Bankai. Yuha is then categories above them because of how he's absorbed the Mimihagi, the Soul King, etc., plus his own power stacked on top of that because he is the son of the Soul King, so mixing those 2 to 3 things together is a pretty big deal. That being said, he does absorb Aizen when Aizen is hit off guard at the end of that battle, and Aizen still comes back. So he's basically shown to us, based on how Kubo's conveyed his immortality, to genuinely just have like true unkillable immortality, like at a level where it's basically he surpasses the conceptual erasure. Like it would go beyond that, especially with the fact that a lot of attacks in Bleach are actually using existence erasure, like especially Keto's. There's a fair few of them that do that. There's other attacks.
Like Auto 54.
Yeah, I think it's 54 or 56, the high-end one that Tosin uses. He uses to eradicate Grimjar's arm after he cuts it off, and that is explicitly stated to erase existence of whatever it hits. Same goes with Quincy arrows.
Yeah.
One of the reasons the Quincy's used to get in trouble with the Shinigami many years ago is because they don't cleanse the hollows, they actually just fully eradicate them with their arrows, so that caused issues with the way that the foundation of the universe of Bleach works. But just as a general, real, easy-to-comprehend way to know how unkillable Aizen is, you know, those tiers of entities trying to kill him couldn't do anything about it, and even when his body is fully removed, he still retains that ability to just come back no matter what. And even at a stage where the Hogyoku inside of him is somewhat not listening to him, he was able to keep that immortality. Like, it was granted to him as if it's a unique ability that's now a part of his very being, which makes it even more fun.
Here's a really basic way of looking at it, right? So think of just like the most generic regen merchants in, I don't know, anime that you can think of. Think of all of them. I think the most generic one would be Majin Buu or Cell or, you know, whatever have you. There are a lot of regen merchants in anime, but think of Majin Buu for an instance, right? If you were to obliterate every atom from his body, right, like say the Spirit Bomb does, Dragon Ball attacks when they get high intensity, they remove you on an atomic level in Dragon Ball Z. That doesn't kill Aizen. So if that Super Spirit Bomb in Dragon Ball Z, let's say it vaporized Aizen, and they're like, hey, we did it, he would actually just come back like nothing happened. He would just reappear. You'd respawn like it was a video game. Another example, think of the Beerus Hakai attack, or even those God of Destruction Hakai attacks. Those are stated to be next level attacks, and this is something you need to really, really consider when it comes to how immortal a character is. There are different types of immortality. There's like, you know, reliant immortality, you know, there's like a spiritual immortality or astral immortality. Reliant immortality is like, oh, if there's an object in the universe somewhere, then they can just like be bound to that and come back. Aizen has more of that existence immortality. So even an attack that removes your very, very existence at all of you, not just atomic or cellular attack. Like imagine like Rasen Shuriken trying to interact with Aizen or something, or a True Seeking Orb from Naruto interacting with Aizen, or Luffy trying to punch Aizen. How do these characters kill him? They don't. They literally don't. Let's say Kaguya was just a universal or solar system level being, and let's just give Aizen every debuff in existence, right? Let's say Aizen is just like some weird mountain level being. Let's say Kaguya throws her expansive True Seeking Orb super dimensional nuke at Aizen, hits him point blank. He comes back, you know? And that's something people just cannot comprehend. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, when he obliterated Cell, Aizen's just coming back. It doesn't matter. And so a lot of people really just do not understand the level of immortality he's actually at. And it gets to the point where even characters such as the Cleaner, potentially, or Ichibei and his conceptual negation, where he can decide the concepts and how powerful they are in his universe, they cannot execute Aizen. He can literally rewrite Aizen's concept and he'll still be immortal. They have to seal him up and throw him basically in Hades and just like keep him there for 20,000 years until they kind of forget about him or something, because no one can deal with him at all. That leads us to our next part, which is his mind hacks. Now, I'll let you give your own thoughts about the mind hacks. I'm kind of curious what you think about the whole Yuha encounter and stuff like that. But I actually think Aizen's mind hacks is a bit downplayed. Now, the way it's described in Bleach is that he affects your 5 senses. But he doesn't just do that, because he doesn't make you sort of trip out like you're on LSD or something, right? It's not very obvious. It's more like a Kodo Matsukami. You don't really know you're under the illusion. And then he basically decides your entire reality and perception based on that. He can make you see him however he wants. He could be there or not be there. And you have really no idea unless you're like touching him directly or his sword, or if he really allows you to. Even characters that are arguably stronger than him are still subject to that attack. But the problem with that is that people assume that this is just on a physical level. But that's not true. Kyoka Suigetsu does not affect you on a physical level. It affects the 5 senses of your being. Like your actual existence is affected by Kyoka Suigetsu. So even when your actual being is altered, your entire physicality is eradicated and regenerated, it does not matter. Your existence itself is sort of plagued, it's stamped by Kyoka Suigetsu. So even when Yuha basically transcends to an entirely higher level of being, it's still ingrained in him. And these beings, they're not physical beings. Like if a human was to look at them, they would be invisible. Like, they might as well be spirits compared to them. And Kyoko Suigetsu is affecting them. Not because it's a physical thing, even though it affects you physically, it affects the 5 senses of your actual soul. So not only do you need mind hacks resistance on that level, you then need mind hacks resistance for your being itself, which is something so weirdly niche that most verses cannot comprehend it. Because realistically, affecting the 5 senses seems like such a basic ability, but it's really not in the context of Bleach. And I'm sorry for yapping about that, but I recently people have really been downplaying it based on that statement and completely ignoring the context of how it's used in Bleach, and I always thought it was kind of annoying.
You know what I really believe is that I think it's more of a fact that most people don't actually understand what they're reading in Bleach, and that's the bigger issue, is that Aizen's hacks is really crazy in the sense that, ironically, Sen's 5 senses, it's not just the 5 senses, it is like Seth said, it's like a poison that enters your actual soul and rattles every part of it to the point where we have characters in Bleach that are in the range of 2,000 years old that don't have any clue they're under it. Like, the Shinji encounter in Karakura Town is probably the biggest example where it's so misinterpreted, that scene, but he never cuts Aizen a single time. And then he asks Aizen, when were you using Kyoka Soigetsu? And he's like, bro, since when would I ever turn it off? What are you saying? Like, you've been under it this entire time for 100+ years. So it's got a range where it can be just set on someone for over 100 years and embedded into their actual being and psyche. But think about this. The only 2 people that have ever, counteracted a little bit of the actual technique itself have been Yamamoto and Unohana. Unohana was only able to tell that the fake body of Aizen's was sus. She didn't even fully know that it was even an illusion. She just had a bit of an inkling. She's like, this seems off. That's just the body. That doesn't account for the fact that she is still under the technique entirely, where she can't combat it at all whatsoever. Even Kubo thinks in that interaction that Aizen would have survived, and he mostly didn't want to encounter Unohana at that point in time just to save her energy because he knew he would go to Sokyoku Hill. But with Yamamoto, he had to gamble getting his head cut off by allowing himself to be cut by Aizen, who he only has a theory that he's in front of him. He doesn't really know that's the real Aizen in front of him, and he's like, alright, I'm gonna let him stab me and then I'll grab him and hopefully this will be the real Aizen. And his gamble turned out to be right, but again, those are just 2 examples where characters had basically no clue they were under it. And then the technique itself gets worse later on, because one of the most misinterpreted scenes in all of Bleach for me is the interaction between Aizen and Yuha in the Mugen. So Yuha goes to meet Aizen to recruit him to the Stern Ritter, and during this very brief conversation where Yuha states, yeah, killing you would be pretty much impossible. I'd rather, ask you to join, but if you're not going to, whatever, I'm just gonna leave. Later that same day, Hushvolth reminds Yuha, he's like, bro, do you realize what time of day it is? We need to go. And then Yuha's like, hold on, Aizen must have put me under his Kyokuseigetsu or something. He doesn't say that verbatim, but he implies he must have messed with my perception of time. Just that brief interaction before Yuha reattained his almighty and real Quincy powers put him in checkmate 200 chapters before the conclusion of the whole series. If that encounter doesn't happen, not only would it make the series far harder for them to progress towards defeating Yuha, but Yuha, just from that, again, small interaction, got cooked just from glancing at Aizen, because Aizen's Kyokuseigetsu evolves at a later point in the series when he finally becomes one with his, his sword, which is at the end of the Dongai Ichigo fight, and there is a statement where he does state to Ichigo that he's about to transform again, but that's when the seal interrupts him and stops him from doing so, right? Because his power's been lowered by having to regen from the Mugetsu hitting him. Now, because of the state he is then shown to be in the war arc, which is that, that post-sealing, regenerated, sort of back to normal Aizen, now stronger than before based on Urahara's statement, he's now one with his blade. He can hide his blade inside of his body like Renegon Pole. So if you watch in the battle against Yuha in the manga, he whips out the blade like it just comes out of nowhere. He doesn't have a handle for it. He doesn't have a guard. It's just purely a part of him. So when you look at Aizen, you don't have to even just look at him cast it with the blade anymore. Kyokuseigetsu is him. If you're within the vicinity of him, you're cooked. You walk into a room with Aizen, you can't do anything to combat the technique.
It's like that Itachi scene, everyone's always like, oh, all Itachi has to do is just point at you or just look at you. It's like Aizen is crazier. If you look at him at all, you're done. Any part of his body, it doesn't matter. You're under it, and you have no idea he even has that ability. Why would you even assume he has that? It's not even logical to assume that. So the moment you look at him in character, I'm pretty sure the only person he doesn't do it on is Ichigo, basically. You're under it. You have Soul Plague, basically. You have Existence Plague, where he can decide anything you perceive near him at all times. And he basically has, like, unlimited stamina. Even Ishin is able to stress himself out for, like, 3 months straight, holding apart the Dongai for Ichigo. And Aizen is considered, like, immeasurable in comparison. Like, he has, like, this Broly-esque quality where the more damage and the more fighting he does, the more powerful he gets, rather than vice versa. Even at a high level. Even when he's annihilated from existence, it's implied he's about to level up and evolve if he wasn't, like, trying to intentionally sandbag and lose. Which is another quality that needs to be discussed as well, because even if someone does have an advantage against him, he's going to keep evolving his state of being until they cannot hurt him anymore, or they can't really deal with him anymore. However that is. It's implied the Hogyoku brought out Orihime's powers, which also deals with causality, brought out Chad's powers. It's implied to deal with, like, the entire story. It's almost like the narration or the plot itself, enhancing all these characters, just ingrained in Aizen's being. Like, he was basically almost like this weird pseudo-author character, sort of like a false Yuha type character, and now it's just embedded in him to make him however he wishes. So think about Maharaga and JJK. Aizen has that embedded in him, if not just way crazier than that.
I have a interesting page right in front of me that I'd like to read too for a very early iteration of Aizen. Captain Aizen isn't scary because he uses Kyoku Soigetsu. Kyoku Soigetsu is a terrifying power, but there are lots of guys who'd rather die than obey him if that was all he had. Captain Aizen's powers are without equal. Beware of Kyoku Soigetsu? No, that's reckless. Beware of everything else? No, that's reckless too. The sky falling, the earth cracking open. You can pull all your wits together to prepare for all kinds of calamities, but Captain Aizen's powers are beyond any precautions. That's what Gin was saying in regards to just Aizen and Karakura Town when he was fighting against the Shinigami.
And there are other haxes that he has with immortality, but as well as just durability. Spiritual pressure kind of gives you a strange aura where you can negate many hacks. So for instance, it's heavily implied that if Baragan was to try to scrap with Aizen, his Respira, basically his time-altering senescence ability to age him, doesn't even cause him any ailment. It's implied he has death hacks resistance if he's stronger than his opponent, so even a weaker death hacks user may be negated just by his aura. If you try to touch him and you're too weak, you get eradicated. So let's say he's in a verse full of like 99% fodder, and maybe there's like a few top tiers he has to deal with. Those fodder characters just can't even touch him. Throw him in My Hero Academia, Deku tries to hit him with 100% smash, he's just gonna obliterate himself, like, on contact. He's not even gonna touch him. He's gonna get obliterated in his aura because he's too weak to actually do anything. So you wanna imagine what Aizen would be like in Naruto. You remember Madara versus the Shinobi Alliance? You know, he's kind of like being very dexterous, you know, using his eyes to kind of kick him around. Aizen just stands there and they obliterate themselves on him. You can just walk through them. Like, they can't actually do anything to him. There's absolutely zero cause for concern or any type of failsafe they can even implement. Most of their attacks are just not even powerful enough to get through his existence-erasing barrier around his body at all times that negates hacks itself. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if Genjutsu itself in the verse may have to have an argument to go through his existence-erasing spiritual barrier around his body at all time, because it actually erases energy itself from existence as well. We see that with the Cleaner, we see that with Yuha's abilities, we see that with anyone that tries to deal with him, all these spiritual beings. You have to be near him in an order of magnitude to even interact with him as a character. And so he sort of has like Gojo's Infinity, if you want to put it that way. He has Gojo's Infinity, but it erases you from existence if you're not on his level. And that's something people do not understand, like, about the character.
The way that you verbalize that is fantastic, because the way that the anime showcases Aizen's spiritual barrier, it's shown to be like a circle around him that, of course, it works different to Gojo's, you know, infinity around him, but it's pretty much the same thing in the sense that you'd have to prove that these attacks could even penetrate that, because everything that's coming into contact with him is being killed or eradicated. An example would be, all he does is glance at the Cleaner. This is a being that governs time and space, specifically governs time and space. He looks at it and it just gets blown up just from a glance of his eyes, and that's in quite a weaker form than what he is in the War Arc. Along with that too, Gin specifies to Aizen, he's like, bro, we need to go. This thing doesn't operate with spiritual pressure. It just attacks beyond like reason, like it's on a conceptual level of attack power, and he doesn't care. Aizen's like, those who hide behind reason are weak or something to that effect, and he just glances and kills it. And there are other examples of this later on where you see, say, Aizen's Kyoku Soigetsu, right? He places it onto Yuha, and this was something that was kind of touched upon earlier by Seth in the video, but pretty much He puts it on Yuha in the Muken. Ichibei rewrites Yuha's whole character with his black ink to conceptually turn him into the power of an ant. Yuha then restores his powers, but Kyoka Suigetsu is still present on his body, regardless of the conceptual up and down of having his power removed and put back.
And this isn't full power Aizen either. This is like Aizen in a gimp suit, dude. Like his spiritual pressure is like stuck to his body, like it's plastered to him, and he's still able to out-hacks Ichibei. Crazy that people think Ichibei could fight Aizen, by the way. Totally delusional.
Yeah, true. There is another thing I want to add to the end of that note before I wrap up that point, but something that's going on passively here that goes beyond just who can swing faster and move quicker and hit harder is that Aizen has reached a level based upon the wording that's implied towards how he deals with the cleaner, and then how Ichibei's powers are centered around conceptual manipulation of one's power and being with the power of words, etc. Aizen's powers essentially defy logic at this point in Bleach. That's what's being said. Not only were there statements about him earlier that say the same thing, and even the new Bleach game has statements in the trailer about Aizen with the same thing, like he's beyond comprehension, his powers surpass everything, all these crazy over-the-top statements, which apparently Kubo was involved with the game, so I'll take them somewhat as canon. You can always disregard them, but the point is that if he goes beyond reason and he's beyond any precautions, and we take this stuff as hyper literal, that means that the logic of Ichibei's ink being on him wouldn't even do anything to him, because not only could the Hogyoku just grant him immortality against that, but he might actually just look at Ichibei and one-shot him with a glance.
Kind of like what Yuha did when he was weaker than Aizen as well.
Yeah, exactly. Another piece of evidence would be that he isn't just like a little bit stronger. He has surpassed characters like Shunsui, Yamamoto. These are characters who over the time skip don't actually get stronger, but they can fight Shustaffel level Quincy. Keep that in mind. And the Aizens we see that destroy the cleaner, fight Dongai Ichigo, they're in a different caliber of power to those characters I just referenced. Like, Shunsui does not beat that Aizen. Yamamoto does not beat that Aizen. They get one-tapped by him because of how transcendent he is. And that's why when he does appear in the War Arc, it's like, he basically skips the queue of power where he just goes and fights Soul King Yuha, and it's just an expected thing to happen.
Even Captain Aizen is theorized or pretty heavily implied by Kubo to be able to take on Shunsui's Bankai as well. Now, whether that's he can negate its abilities with his spiritual pressure, or he would sidestep it entirely, don't know. But it just shows that even Captain Aizen was already fighting these like world-altering entities, just realistically. And then he transcends that many times. But to move on a little bit, because we were on that for a while, I think that's the main point though. Like, can you deal with the Soul Plague or the Existence Plague? Can you deal with the conceptual existence erasing attack barriers? Can you deal with like him having like this beyond like Majin Buu, just absolutely unkillable respawning demon character? He has just a plethora of other techniques as well. He has massive energy absorption techniques like his Hado dragons. He also has, let's say, sealing techniques as well. So if he was to fight other immortal beings, he has ways to seal them. He probably has even capabilities such as throwing people into alternate dimensions. I'm sure he's able of conjuring an Espada cube or whatever he has of his own. If that was even necessary, I don't think so, but he actually does have abilities to BFR people because he can BFR himself. So he has ways of actually dealing with other immortal characters if they were so. So let's say for whatever reason, he couldn't kill Majin Buu. Whatever. He definitely could. He has the existence erasing qualities to kill Majin Buu. You'd be pretty hard pressed to prove Majin Buu has resistance to that, at least in Dragon Ball Z, especially Cell and those characters. Good luck proving Raditz has existence erasure resistance. Good luck proving they have any ability to conjure up an ability to defend their souls at that point in the series. Good luck with that. It doesn't even matter. On top of that, other characters, when they have to deal with Aizen, they would have to seal him because they can't actually kill him in any way. So if they were to erase from existence, he would respawn. Even a conceptual attack, negating all his power, he would probably respawn again. So the obvious onus is you need to seal him. If you don't have that, you can't deal with him. And that's what happens in literally Bleach itself. But the problem with that is that there's many layers of power nulling in Bleach and sealing in Bleach, and it doesn't actually affect Aizen. So Aizen is only sealed basically on his own whim. It's implied he could sort of break out when he wants. This is sort of implied even by Shunsui. Shunsui is like, I did not unseal his other parts of his body. So Aizen actually unseals himself, and then he's like, hey, hey, are you gonna unseal the rest of me? And he's like, yeah, no, that's good, bro. You're fine. And it was like Aizen just did that on purpose, just to show him like, hey, I'm not actually bound here against my will. Like, I actually just wanted to be here. And so even if Ichibei is conceptually nulling him, all these things, it's really hard to say how well they could keep him there. And then the Hogyoku on top of that can keep evolving him to the point he may surpass whatever seal he's actually in. Let's say Six Paths Naruto beat up Aizen, hit him with the Magnet Rasengan, and put some True-Seeking rods around him. Eventually, he's going to out-adapt, outlast, and then escape that seal, no matter what. Same thing with Itachi. Let's say for whatever reason Itachi's Totsuka Blade hit him. It wouldn't, by the way, because every attack in Bleach is like a Totsuka Blade on roids. They're all astral attacks.
He could arguably parry the blade with his Zanpakuto.
Yeah, Captain Aizen could parry the Totsuka Blade. They're definitionally the same attack. Yeah, so just imagine that versus Hydra Orochimaru as an example. Or even like, Toji having his own split soul attacks and stuff like that. Every Bleach character has that. And so, let's say for whatever reason he does get sealed in the Totsuka Blade and inside the gourd, the Hogyoku is going to keep evolving past the point of drunkenness, and he can BFR himself, he can manipulate time and space to remove himself from that gourd and unseal himself, even with conceptual barriers trying to hold him back or reduce his powers, let alone a state of drunkenness or the magnet-style seal or whatever. It's sort of just this, like, unlimited power increase, and these characters in Bleach, realistically, they can gain and sort of absorb a lot of power. Even a character like Senna, who is canon, by the way, that whole Memories of Nobody movie, that's totally canon. She's in this blank space, and they're absorbing infinite souls, and the majority of souls in Bleach are not in this space, by the way. She's absorbing infinite souls, creating like this like solar system sized dimension, and this is considered absolutely cheeks compared to any of the top tiers in the verse. She's never even referenced as a powerhouse at all. Never once compared to Yamamoto, never once compared to Aizen, Ichigo, or Yuha. These characters are engulfing multiple realities, and Aizen has the ability to absorb power from these things and then surpass their realities and their logic itself to then unseal himself if he realistically wanted to. And he even does that in his own verse, where they are specifically creating a seal to outdo his Hogyoku ability. He still can arguably unseal himself. And that's just something people just completely also ignore when it comes to the characters. And so he's just going to torment your verse for basically eternity, unless you have some crazy, like outer versal, just beyond many of these concepts, types of erasure, or like implement death hacks to a being lower than them. It's like, if you don't have these things, Aizen's going to just torment your verse forever because he's immortal, can't be sealed, grows more and more powerful, and not just a little bit too, not just going from like mountain level to island level or something like that. We're talking about beings that can absorb like solar systems levels of energy, even like in like the mid tiers, like realistically speaking. And people just ignore it all the time. They just love to downplay Bleach. They love to ignore all the context, and it just does not add up. When you read all of the data on Aizen, it's like, bro, you better hope Aizen wants to lose in your verse. Like, genuinely. Like, I'm just thinking about it, bro. Like, not to make like a meme or anything, but it's like, what does One Piece do to this guy, bro? Like, what does My Hero Academia do to this guy, bro? Like, what does JJK do? Like, it's crazy. Even like, think about Dragon Ball Z. Like, what does most of Dragon Ball Z do to him? Like, at best, maybe you would argue Majin Buu is stronger than him. I'm starting not to think so sometimes, but I'll get into that maybe in a future video. This is just sort of just a jerk-off video, but, realistically, it's like, what does everyone up the cell even do to this guy? They don't do anything to him.
The Soul Society in Bleach basically decides that instead of using their execution blade called the Sokyoku that can overwhelm everything in existence with its spiritual pressure with a passive release, they think that can't take out Aizen. None of their weird science Mayuri techniques can. Their only option is to strap him to a chair, which was conveniently allowed to happen thanks to Urahara, who was able to plant seals on him when he was very, very weakened. So he was constantly in this state of suppression, which means that normal sealing just mostly won't work in these cross-verse battles, because trying to seal an Aizen that's not lowered to that level that he was after getting hit by an attack that, in his words, was a dimensional tier above him, keep that in mind.
He also allowed himself to get hit by those seals, and even Urahara says it himself. He's like, normally that wouldn't even touched you. Like, you wouldn't have let that even happen.
There's a lot of like character nuance going on there. Like, for example, as Seth said, Aizen normally would have never put himself in a situation where he would have actually gotten touched by those if he was in character. He was on a bit of a power high, and that gets highlighted quite a bit throughout that part of the series. And then as he sits in the chair, as time goes on throughout his sentence, which by the way, they gave him a 20,000 plus year sentence because they had no way to kill the guy. Even Mayuri clarifies that too. Like, he's actually actually just unkillable. So they strap him to the chair, just continuously suppress him with the gimp suit from Pulp Fiction, and he's just strapped there stuck, right? And he gets stronger. According to Urahara, he's like, yeah, I think he's even more powerful than when he fought Ichigo. So that's just absolutely insane. He just passively gets stronger and stronger.
He's getting stronger like Frieza was in Hell in the Cocoon, like in Dragon Ball Super.
Yeah. Literally. He's getting stronger from not even doing anything except just sitting there and thinking. And then if we have this version of Aizen be completely just controlled with an Xbox controller in the back of his head, and he's got nothing but intent to kill, he has nothing mentally holding him back, which was part of the reason why he did lose to Ichigo, was because he actually wanted to be defeated. There's a lot of that clear narrative being shown. Even Ichigo questions it after the battle. He has a conversation with Urahara. This won't be a part of this hypothetical here when we talk about what like a true full power intent to kill Aizen can do. He's just not going to do that. And then with full assistance from the Hogyoku, he is going to have access to being able to make conceptual attacks irrelevant to him. His regen will get better and better, especially if he survives too. Like you have some DC character just like annihilate him with a wave of its hand, and let's say he survives for whatever reason, he'll just then adapt to that and then become stronger and stronger, which is crazy because the ceiling for potential just keeps going with that. As long as he wills things into existence with the Hogyoku, it gets even worse too, because it will be something that makes Maharaga look like dog, truly. And with the mind hacks too, something I should have clarified earlier is that this isn't like a 1v1 mind hacks. Like he can cast it on thousands of people. He does that at the start of Bleach, where they talk about in the past, he showed off his alleged Zanpakuto technique to basically all of the Soul Society and cast it on everybody there that was present while keeping it retroactively on. Which apparently in the novels, it's stated to be an incredibly hard thing to do, but because of his level of spiritual pressure and how big of a tank of power he has, especially now with current Aizen, he could just do that to thousands of people and it's nothing to him, just passively for 100+ years.
Yeah, and so this is why he's a bit of a menace compared to, say, like Itachi in these verse soloing competitions. Now you can see like why Itachi's more like a 1v1 type character if you watch that video, and Aizen is more like, can your verse deal with Aizen? That's the real question, not necessarily like a 1v1. Like, can your verse even deal with that guy? He is much more of a Solo King type character. Now, as for Itachi versus Aizen, that's a totally different debate and debacle. But Aizen is obviously much better at soloing entire verses of characters. Obviously, some people could beat Aizen. There are like higher dimensional entities. There's a lot of Marvel characters, and there's even some Fate characters that have like this sort of outer death hacks concepts where they can just introduce it to beings that don't even have a concept of death and kill them. Things like that. There's certain beings that'd be able to target.
Cthulhu.
There's certain beings that could actually target his Hogyoku even if it doesn't exist, and then grant it death and then kill him. There's a lot of weird stuff in fiction. There's also beings that could just like kind of mind hacks him until he's just like basically a vegetable and then deal with him however they want. He's not obviously omnipotent, but just being realistic, 99% of fiction ain't built like that. let's be honest for a minute. Most of fiction cannot actually do that type of stuff. You know, obviously there's some memes as well, like, oh, Aizen's so powerful, but you know, he was jerking off a mountain blown up. You know, personally, Clyde and I, we like to joke about that too. It seems like he was talking about like just parrying his sword, like he accidentally erases a mountain from existence rather than just destroying it. I think that's mainly what they're talking about, but it is goofy. It was goofy, yep.
My view of that, because we may as well touch upon that, because it is the big downplay. There's two in particular. There's the physical strength thing that he states to Ichigo, and then there's the mountain feat. I've always interpreted that as like, just from mere parries of blade, they're not just destroying the mountains, they're making them blink out of existence, because there's no rubble or anything. They're cleanly just evaporated, and I think that's still like a valid thing to be like, look what we're casually doing just from clashing. Like, this is impressive.
As an example, you know, I do think Shonen Jump tried to make parallels between, you know, Naruto and Bleach. And so, you know, the parallel is that with just a swing of their sword, mountains are going down, right? So Madara does that in his verse, right? He cuts down a mountain. But look at the way Madara cuts down a mountain versus the way the mountain in Bleach is just gone. Like, it's not the same thing, if that makes sense. Like, there's clearly...
Yeah, there's a different thing happening here. Like, in terms of the physics, something different is happening instead of just a clash of blade. It's getting blinked out of existence, just to clarify that. And here's the thing, too. Earlier in the series, like, this is just the easiest way to debunk it, even being like a feat of power for Aizen that shows a ceiling of what he can do. Grimmjow is stated to do better stuff than that. Like, him releasing a Granrei Zero can destroy an area that dwarfs the mountain, like, thousands upon thousands of times over.
Ulquiorra's Lanza does, like, more AoE than the Fragor from Transcendent Aizen.
Yes,
so, like,
yes.
Clearly, Aizen is not talking about the actual just DC of his attacks. Obviously, he can do more than what was shown on the screen. He surpasses Bankai Yamamoto and these beings who can honestly destroy all the worlds together if he was to just flex his muscles a bit. So he's not talking about that. I do think it was a stupid statement. And I'm not gonna lie, I think Aizen might have been having like a manic episode or something, because in hindsight, it doesn't even make sense with anything that happens in the story.
It's one of those moments where, like, if you're in the editorial room, you would just say to Kurobo, like, bro, do something more impressive than Mountain, because you're meant to say Aizen being super strong. There is another statement that was referenced just before, and that's the physical part, and it doesn't exactly show, like, this is a limitation for what they can do in combat. It's more Aizen having a theory of, I don't know what you've done, because I can't sense you, but maybe you sacrifice your spiritual pressure for physical strength to try and brawl with me.
Yeah,
Now,
all that means is, like, let's say, like, Ultra Instinct Goku squared up on Aizen. It just means that he thinks Ultra Instinct Goku is just so physically strong, he could punch him still, like, even though he has, like, insane spiritual pressure. That's literally all that would mean, just realistically. But,
there was something, too, that I wanted to also add to a prior point, and that's Aizen's, ability to mess with people's minds can also have a sort of Mayuri effect, where he poisons Zayal, and he's able to fully mess up his perception of time. I did reference it with the Yuha point earlier, but apparently it's more solidified in later material that the time manipulation of Kyoka Soigetsu has become a massive part of what he can do too, so he could probably slow people's brains down to the point where they're just not even operating at like a sane level in combat along with what he can normally do, so...
And the Espada are fragmentary, characters of Aizen's psyche and possibly some abilities he possesses. Not fully, but some of them. I even think the Respira is actually a foreshadowing to him being able to kill people with his presence, even, which is kind of interesting. But
yeah, and your point before about the Fragor versus Ulquiorra's attack is a really good point here. So, as I said with the Grimmjow Granrei Zero versus the Mountain Feet and how it's a clear contradiction and people are just like not paying attention to what's going on with the attacks here. The Fragor versus the Lanzador Relampago is a really good example because if those two attacks clashed, Aizen's would win, but Aizen's looks smaller, however, it's more dense in attack potency, so that's something I'd like people to keep in mind when they look at these things happening on screen. There's a lot of sort of like passive stuff that goes on that gets forgotten throughout the combat. Like, here's another example, right? Seth mentioned earlier about the Respira. If we take Respira as true death hacks and not just an extension of spiritual pressure that just erodes you, right? That means that, like, he's negating stuff like someone attacking with the concept of reason. He is negating death hacks itself. He's just glancing at beings and removing them entirely from existence. He walks near a human and just the human just vanishes from coming into contact with his body.
Yeah, instead of Tsukuyomi like mind hacking them, he just like looks at them and they cease to exist. It's kind of intense.
Seriously, yeah. I like what you said earlier with the Genjutsu example too, because this is like not like a hill that I'd die on, and neither would Seth, but if you had to visualize the chakra from the glance like piercing Aizen's being, it has to get past that barrier, and that's an argument that could probably exist where it might not get through it. So if you can't like attack him on a level where you could be a genuine threat to him, you might not even be able to cast him under certain hypnosis abilities because it just won't touch him.
And sometimes he just like, maybe you could argue he might allow certain things to happen, but if he doesn't know it's coming especially, it's probably not touching him.
There are some very odd statements from Aizen where he kind of implies towards Ichigo that if he doesn't hurry up and get stronger as he proceeds to enter the real Karakura town to then go against the Zero Squad, that he's going to devour Ichigo. So I do believe there was a sort of hidden plan where what he was going to do was he was going to push Ichigo to ascend, and then he was going to, with his weird deformed alien being now, absorb Ichigo to then hit a higher level of power. This is entirely just something I've interpreted from the dialogue in the manga. It could not be true entirely, you could just disregard it, but it looks like that might be something he could do. The Espada are extensions of his being, whether that be mentally and physically. Arden Yero does that. That's part of his whole thing, is to absorb entities and become stronger, steal their abilities, etc. It's a very possible thing he was going to do that.
Whether it's not literal or not too, like maybe he's talking about like, oh, he wants Ichigo to become strong because then when they clash, there's like a synthesis where he evolves from Ichigo's whatever whatever Ichigo has, he kind of obtains a power to defeat it. That's possible as well.
Then for a final sort of note, because I want to try my very best to condense all of my thoughts here, as this is quite the dissertation on how OP Aizen really is, and I think something quite needed because there is quite a lot of misinformed discourse about him. But when we talk about how he operates, he enters a room. If you glance at him, you are now under Kyokusoigetsu. His passive spiritual pressure can negate most attacks coming towards him. He's pretty much immune to most physical attacks, like if Deku or some JJK characters tried to rush him and punch him, what they would do is they would approach him, they would then proceed to vanish from existence, from not even touching him.
His barrier would be invisible to them.
His passive abilities when it comes to just straight up raw power far exceeds stuff like his ability to casually create a fake sky and sun in Las Noches, and that's very early in the series. Grimmjow's then stated to be able to destroy a sun, which is what Seth mentioned earlier too.
And he's fodder to Aizen. So.
Exactly, he's absolutely nothing compared to Aizen. In much later showings, once they hit that conceptual level and beyond, which is far beyond just normal sword combat, we then get to this Yuha caliber where he's just lifting his hand up and stating that he could like mold all the universes together. Just casually, he can just have authority over that. That far surpasses what Zero Squad does, and Aizen is above them. In the anime, they go out of their way to really emphasize how powerful they are, thanks to Kubo's assistance. And just from a mere release of Bankai, they're shaking the multiple realms of Bleach. I am of the belief that every individual realm is a universe. It's shown visually like that in the anime. It's described that way in the manga. Soul Society's got stars and a sun. It's not the same planet as the world of the living. It's in a different realm entirely. They have very similar universes, and Zero Squad is not just like shaking these celestial floating earth-like bodies. What they're doing is they're spreading their power so fast and so broad that in a second, Bankai gets activated, and all of a sudden, that spiritual pressure has gone from one realm to the next, boom, it's just covered like 3 universes casually. And Aizen makes those characters look like absolute shit in terms of power. So you have like this multi-universal, time-manipulating mind hacks conceptual entity that can literally just evolve infinitely as long as he wants to kill you.
Even if you think that like Soul Society or whatever are smaller, there is one page that implies they are somewhat not like these like weird pocket dimensions with just like a moon and a planet. There's like this gag panel where Ichigo is implied he can kick a pebble to another galaxy, so it's like it's obviously not some just disconnected pocket dimension. There's obviously something there. But even if you want to say that, Yuha himself is then implied he's going to engulf everything, not just like all of the worlds. Like he's really going
I
to...
kind of downplayed that actually. Yeah, he's going to collapse the space that exists around all the quote-unquote universes in Bleach, but...
Yeah, the only way that they're a planet is like, what is it, like a disconnected dimension, but you can see through the spatial dimension or barrier to like the galaxy outside of it? Like, how does this even work? It's like, it's very bizarre to look at it that way.
There's a lot of weird mental gymnastics, and the only realm in Bleach, I'll sort of finish this point here, but the only realm in Bleach that's weird, you can sort of say this about Hell too, but the only real solidified weird realm in Bleach is Hueco Mundo. There's a lot of statements about that where they say it's just like a flat, endless plane of sand that never ends, and it's never shown to be daytime. In fact, it's so much so never daytime, implying there's no sun, it's just a singular moon and it goes on forever, that Aizen's like, bro, I need daytime. So he makes his own fake reality inside of Hueco Mundo so he can have it light in the sky with a fake sun.
Not only can Aizen cast 100 different unique spells via Kido, which include elemental attacks, barriers, sealing, time stop, and more, but along with his ability to fly, he might also be able to teleport with the Hogyoku. Gin and Tosen were shown using teleportation Kido earlier in the series, so to move slower than that, when Kido can be cast without incantation and now he moves at a much higher level of power than any of those other characters do, his reforming technique might just be that.
No matter how you look at it, the main thing about cross-verse things with these types of characters is, hey, does your verse actually have a way to stop that character from ravaging everything you have in there? And most verses don't, actually. So thank you very much for Clyde for coming. Thank you for the sponsor, and hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and until next time.